Good morning, everybody. So good to see you all. Such a pleasure, such a treat. First of all, I wanted to thank Caitlin Bellina, who is our Temple Emmanuel host this morning. Caitlin, thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you for this class. I'm so eager to do this class. I feel like this class is a really important complement to and coda to People of Dead Jews that we've been working our way through all these weeks. And I'm very eager to end with these set of texts. So let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. And let me also ask those of you who are not showing your faces, if you might consider showing your faces, because it just makes it much easier for us to have a conversation when we can see your beautiful faces, panim el panim. If you're comfortable, we would love to see your faces. Let's thank God for the gift of learning Torah together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. So, where we were last week, and the reason for the text that we're going to look at today, was that Dara Horn, having now narrated 12 chapters of her horrifying but true principle that people love dead Jews, including 3 of them in America within the last 3 years, Pittsburgh and then San Diego and then the tri-state area, including one 20 minutes from her home. And then reading the coverage of the attacks on Jews around Hanukkah a few years ago, and seeing that, well, the assailants felt squeezed by the Jews, they felt squeezed by the Hasids, etc. She talks about she just gave up. And then her end of the book is she finds some hope and strength by deciding to devote herself to Talmud study, Daf Yomi. Daf means a page, and as we talked about last week, it's actually 2 pages because it's the front and back, and Yomi means daily. So it's the daily page, or to be more precise, the daily pages, 2 pages a day of Talmud, and she starts doing that, and that gives her energy and hope. And she starts by talking about the very first teaching in the Talmud, and which we're going to look at today. So what I wanted to do for our coda is to do 2 sections of Talmud. The first is the iconic section that she treats in her last chapter. It's the first chapter, and it's the first page of Talmud. You might have heard about it, and it's about when do we say the Shema in the evening. That's the question. What's the window of opportunity for us to say Shema? Another way to put it is, when have you blown your opportunity? When have you missed the chance? Where's the point where when you realize, I forgot to say Shema, no, it's too late, you can't say it, you just blew it. Is there such a time or not? That's the very first question of the Talmud. And we're going to look at that. And here's the lens with which I want you to look at it. The Talmud is going to be providing an answer where it assumes that the temple is actually still in place. One of the main references to how to answer that question is assumes a temple, it assumes a priest, it assumes that the way that the priests used to eat dinner, namely the whole community would give the Kohen their dinner because they didn't get land. The Kohens and the Levites didn't get land, so they weren't economically self-sufficient. They got a kind of a communal kiddush that's called teruma, which is contribution, the communal contribution. It assumes this entire world that is in fact vanished. And I want to ask you to think about what that means, that the Talmud on page 1, in the very first teaching, posits the existence of a counterfactual. It's as if something that is no more, does not exist, was destroyed, is in the history books, that's guiding the Talmudic reflections in the present tense. And what is that? And why is that? That's going to be the first part of our discussion. And then the second part is, since Derehorn says the best response to people love dead Jews is the Talmud, I wanted to actually show you what the Talmud itself does. The Talmud's not only the response to this, according to Derehorn, but it also very much expresses the same truth. And so I want to show you that selection as well. So without further ado, Caitlin, can you please screen share page 1? And we'll read this, and then we'll break it up in pieces for conversations. Okay, this is the beginning of the Talmud, which, by the way, famously begins on page 2, not on page 1, because there's no beginning and no end. Okay, here we go. There's a biblical obligation to recite the Shema twice daily, once when we lie down at night, and once when we arise in the morning. As the verse states, "Uveshach b'cha v'kumecha," when you lie down and when you arise. This obligation is not tied, however, to the moment that the individual goes to sleep or gets up. Rather, it relates to the time when it is customary for people to engage in these activities, whether the individual in question does so or not. The following Mishnah delineates the time period in which the evening Shema may be said. Okay. Me'ematai karin et Shema ba'arvin. From when may we recite the Shema? Or what's the window of opportunity? Here's the first answer, and I'm just going to read this and then we'll unpack it. Misha'a shehakohanim nichnasim le'achol b'trumatan. From the time that the Kohens, who were impure, ritually impure, may enter to eat their teruma. Okay, so what that is that's when 3 stars appear. And the question is, why is it that they don't just say night? Why is it that they don't just say when 3 stars appear? But everything, but the first answer to this question, what's the window of opportunity, is when there's a temple, when there's priests, when there's ritual purity, ritual impurity, and then ritual purity, and then when they eat these communal contributions. Every part of that sentence is no more. There is no more temple. There is no Kohen in the sense, I mean, there's a Kohen, sure, who takes the first Aliyah, but there's no Kohen who is a religious functionary. There is no more ritual purity and ritual impurity. When you look at that line, from the time that the Kohanim who were Tameh means ritually impure, that's no longer a thing. All those laws are no longer in effect once the temple was destroyed. And then Truma, which is that communal meal, that doesn't exist. So here, just marinate on this question. What is the reason for that? Okay, and then we'll continue. And one may recite the Shema until the end of the first watch. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. But the sages say it may be recited until midnight. Rabban Gamliel says it may be recited until the light of dawn rises. Okay, so what you get is you get 3 different windows of opportunity. You can say Shema from here to here. You can say Shema from here to here. You can say Shema from here to here. And each one gives you an added window of time, including Rabban Gamliel, who is the big cheese. He is the patriarch, and he says, in fact, you can have it until the morning dawn's early light. And then there's a story. It once happened that Rabban Gamliel's sons came home after midnight from a banquet. They said to Rabban Gamliel, "We have not yet recited the Shema. May we recite it now?" Now that just feels like a fictional story. You have kids come home from a party and it's 3 a.m. and the dad is up pacing, waiting for them. And what they say is, "Dad, can we say Shema?" That has to be fiction. But he said to them, if the light of dawn has not yet risen, you're obligated to recite the Shema. Sure, before you go to sleep, say the Shema and then go to sleep. Now, what I want to, Caitlin, if you can come back now to the full screen. I want to ask you to think about how do you experience this learning? The question that the Talmud asks, the mode of argument, you have three different thoughts, three different points of view. In what way is this interesting or relevant to your life? And in what way is this possibly helpful to the fact that 20 minutes from your house, Jews were gunned down and the New York Times did not care? How is it that this is helpful? This is her big idea, right? Yeah, they hate us then, they hate us now, they hate us 20 minutes from my kids, from my house. The one thing that gives me hope is studying this. And she talks about just what we read. So I want to read this kind of existentially. In what way is this helpful to people? If this is helpful to anybody, if you're finding this helpful, I'd love to hear how you're finding it helpful. So the floor is yours. Anybody who wants to speak. If I miss you, put your name in the chat, and I'll be happy to call on you. Anyone? Judy Swartz. Thank you.
Okay, so I think in the first part is, remember, this is our heritage, okay, of the temple being in existence, all right? And it was a place that gathered everybody. They supposedly came on the 3 pilgrimages. And so this is an ideal of community and family and togetherness and identity and all that kind of stuff. And once the temple was destroyed, the prophets taught us God wasn't just living in the temple in Jerusalem. God could live within us and be everywhere in the whole world. So there's something very beautiful, if we believe in the Messianic age, that this is something we hope will happen. And that's why we say this prayer, if I forget Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, and why there is such excitement to go to Jerusalem and go to the wall and remember. And in terms of, in terms of Dara Horn, I think she's saying, if we know all our history, we won't be put down. We will know that not only are there villains, there are heroes who die in the sanctification for God's name, and that will give us courage to handle what's going on down the street and so forth and so on, because that is our history. They've tried to put us down, and somehow miraculously this small group has survived. That in itself is such a miracle, it's unbelievable.
So Judy, I hear in your wise words, number one, this is helpful because it focuses us on the land of Israel, the state of Israel, the holy city of Jerusalem. And number two, which is timeless and is our heritage. And number two is it focuses us on our history and on the message that, our temple was destroyed, but here we are in Israel again. And so we're focused on a land and a place that is holy and timeless. We're focused on our heritage, and perhaps it makes us less flotsam and jetsam of history, less people to whom people are always doing things to. We're not just the passive recipients of hatred. This is also about agency. We're back in Israel, we're back in Jerusalem, and we study a place to which we have an eternal connection. I'm hearing all those notes in your words. Other thoughts about how, if at all, studying this kind of thing is helpful? And particularly if you find it not helpful, or if you're puzzled as to why Dara Horn likes this and it just doesn't do it for you, I would love to hear what is it about this that does not do it for you? We love all questions, doubts, and skepticism equally. So any voices on that? Anyone wondering, like, geez Louise, what's all the fuss about? I find this stuff opaque and not speaking to me. If anyone wants to share that voice, David Kopelman.
Mute. Yes, I don't find it very uplifting. I mean, what difference does it make whether you say the Shema at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, midnight? It just seems like it's a lot of nitpicking. It kind of reminds me of the Haggadah when I was a kid at Passover, where the God reached out with an outstretched arm. And does it mean 5 fingers, or does it mean a hand? Does it mean an arm? And all this interpretation where the rabbis debated. It just seems to me, to be honest, might be a little heretical to say it, a little bit of foolishness. To me, it doesn't give me any uplift to have this debate about whether it's, you should say it at 6, or is it okay at 9, or when the high priest was being fed his meal. What's the point of it? It might be an interesting historical note, but causing me to be uplifted from anti-Semitism, that doesn't work for me.
Okay, so David, let me try to tackle your question, because I think there is actually an answer to your question. At least this is my answer to your question. What is a helpful move in response to a world that feels like it's just a hot mess? Including, what's a helpful move in response to a world that has anti-Semitism 20 minutes from where you live? And I think one answer is the creation of a counterworld, where in this counterworld, you have order, peace, love, joy, and blessing. In other words, there's the whole world, which is a hot mess and filled with hatred and all kinds of random bad stuff. And that's out there, and you know it's out there. You don't deny that it's out there, but you say, you know what, I only go around once. I don't want to spend my life in the world with all the hot mess. I'm going to spend my world in a counter world, a small world, a counter world, which is an alternative to the real world or to the big world. And in my alternative counter world, there's going to be order, there's going to be reason, there's going to be systems, there's going to be love, justice, blessing, decency, kindness in my counter world. And I think that what the rabbis are doing on page 1 of the Talmud is trying to inspire us to create a counter world of dignity as a response to a larger world that does not have dignity. And I want to argue that I think we don't exactly inhabit this counter world. But I think that's what we try to do with Temple Emmanuel, and what our members do in their own lives every day, is to create a counter world of dignity and decency. And I want to say one last thing and then come back to you, which is why, and I didn't really get this. I mean, this is an iconic text. Every, rabbinical student and rabbi encounters this text 100 times. But what I got it from this text now, for the first time that I never got, is what's this business with the Kohen and the Teruma and Tameh and all this stuff when it doesn't exist? And I think and they could just say nightfall. We start doing it at nightfall. We start doing it when 3 stars show up. No, they come up with this because they are creating, they're telegraphing that this is about the creation of a counterworld. And in our counterworld, the temple and temple practice and the Kohen is in the present tense. Yeah, we know in the real world, it's not present tense. We know in the real world, the temple is destroyed. But in our counter world, we're going to inhabit a space where we can talk about the Kohen in present tense. And I think, and that's what they telegraph from the very first line. This is about creating a counter world. We can't fix the world, but we can create a counter world. So here's my question back to you, David Kopelman. Do you think creating a counter world is a helpful move? And you're on mute.
Yeah, to a certain extent, it gives you some peace and serenity. But I think the danger of living in this counter world is that it's kind of akin to putting your head in the sand like an ostrich. And the danger is that you'll ignore what's happening in the real world. For example, the Jews in Germany, if they put their head into the Talmud and went into the counter world, they're ignoring the dangers, their present danger, and they might have led them into a certain complacency not to flee Germany. So my own view, my own personal view is, rather than getting too immersed in the counter world, I think we have to face the world we're in. And for example, when she talks about these incidents of anti-Semitism, I think it's incumbent on us to call it out, whether it's coming from Rashida Tlaib or Ayanna Pressley or Al Sharpton or Linda Sarsour or Black Lives Matter. I think it's our obligation to call it out and not to escape into this counter world that might give us some comfort, and it probably does. But I think we're abdicating our responsibility not to face the real world and call out anti-Semitism loud and clear.
So, David, I think this is just, do you know what the hardest word is for us in the year 2021? The word and, A-N-D. We just struggle with the word and, right? I think all of us are inclined to these false polarities, that either we're in the counter world of studying Talmud all day, or we're in the real world advocating for our beliefs and advocating against anti-Semitism. And the question I want to come back to you and to all of us is there an and here? Is that a false polarity? And in fact, is it possible that think about a rose that needs to be planted in soil for the rose to really grow and thrive? Is the move here to be more deeply nurtured by the soil of our history, by the soil of our tradition, by the soil of Jerusalem? And somehow, by being nurtured and anchored in our own history and story and tradition, we now have more to offer in terms of advocating to the world. Just a thought on that. Let me invite some other voices. Anyone who has not yet had a chance to speak, what's your response to this Talmud business? Because, by the way, this is one of the juicier teachings in the Talmud. It gets drier than this, much drier than this. And the question is, it gets way drier than this. And the question is, could you buy into a system where this is the soil you're going to get nurtured from so that you can go and advocate in the world for your convictions? Anyone else want to offer some thoughts on this? Jan Schwartz.
Good morning. I just want to talk, I want to respond though to the counter world. I think for Jews and for our shul in particular, the counter world is doing tzedakah, is helping other people, is doing good causes. We're never going to get rid of the bad stuff in the world. That's just unrealistic. But our temple is so strong because Sisterhood and other members of the shul are involved in so many good works.
Yeah, counter world is, on Sunday morning, we had the biggest haul ever of winter coats. We had a half a dozen people from our, social justice committee collecting coats, and there were lines around the block of people coming to offer coats and blankets and this kind of thing. And I think that's a counter world, right? Where there's negative energy in the world, but here we're going to think positive. Afghan refugee relief, oh my God, is such a counter world. Like, we all read stories about the end of Afghanistan and 20 years of war and the heartbreak and the heartache and oh my God, what was it all for? And that's like a hot mess world. And what you have here is a counter world where like 200 people are helping 7 Afghan refugees, 2 families of 7 Afghan refugees. And that's a counter world. So it's not just, it's a good point, and it's not just Talmudical reasoning, but it's also action that's just different in in spirit. And I guess I would ask all of you to think about what's your counterworld, because it's pretty brutal. If all you did was live and breathe the news of the day, this tornado and that tornado and this hatred and that act and this gun violence and that political paralysis, that's just, you would die of heartbreak. So all of us, in order to survive, need a counterworld. And I guess I'd like to ask you, what is your counterworld and how is it nurturing you for the road ahead? Thank you, Jen. Other thoughts? Judy?
Say back to, I think it was David, it's we're not going to just study for study's sake, for study's sake. The best of studying leads to action. And that, of course, becomes a very positive thing. And that's based on all the history. It's the encouragement, it's the role models, blah, 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 blah. And that's how you balance the two things. Okay? In my book, anyways.
Yeah, that's well said, Judy. Dottie.
Reading this book, I don't think there are many of us who weren't aware of what she was talking about. It's there, but you don't bring it forward. But having it presented that way, the first thing that came to me was you have to have hope. It's something that obviously it's not going to change very much in the world. So you should have a counter world. But the sadness of the point of her book is that it's always there. There are more people, there's more anti-Semitism, and there doesn't seem to be anything that'll break the tragedies, all tragedies. And you just have to hope and pray. And that's my feeling. I mean, I found this it was so sad, but all of us knew what she was speaking about.
Yeah, I want to just say one word about that, Dottie. This is a word that's very topical today. I don't remember this word being such an important word in the earlier parts of my life, but it's a very important word nowadays, which is the word agency. Everybody's talking about agency, which means kind of claiming the power to live your own life. And I think that a lot of this move of Daf Yomi is about agency. That is, being Jewish is not just something that's done to you. Being Jewish means you have agency to live a certain kind of life. And to Judy's point, you study so that you get ideas and ideals clear in your head. You have agency, you have your offense on the field, right? And then once you study, you're empowered to do. Talmud and Maaseh, learning and doing. And this is about putting our offense on the field. This is about agency. This is about not being a recipient of what other people do to us. This is about us having an agenda of tikkun olam, an agenda of repair. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to discuss it. They're going to be high ideas. They're going to be high ideals. And then we are motivated to do it. And by the way, I think that's a much better, if you think about your grandkids, the message of they hate us, they hate us, they hate us is not very inspiring. The message that it's a tough world out there and there's a lot of animosity, but that does not stop us from our own high ideas and high ideals. And we are motivated to fix the world and repair the world. And we're going to learn and we're going to do, and we're going to study about hunger, and then we're going to feed the hungry, and we're going to study about illness and poverty throughout the world, and we're going to do our best to add dignity to every person, et cetera, et cetera. And those are all Jewish responses. That's an agenda that could actually make our kids invested in this project. Any other takers on this first piece of study as a response to what that's about? Cheryl.
I just wanted to, that's what I took from it, what you said, Rabbi, is that it's to study Talmud is an active way to fight against the destruction of Judaism, basically, whether it's assimilation, murder, you're continuing our tradition, and it's an active way to do it instead of being helpless. That's what I.
Great agency and leading to doing, leading to right. That's something that I think could inspire ourselves and the next generation. Other views on this, Paul Greenberg.
So I had a question, which was, I just wondered whether her move to the Talmud as a response, whether that's her way of practicing her idea of resilience as being at the heart of the Jewish story. Especially in the Yiddish tradition that she comes from. She talks, as we know, about the Jewish stories not ending, they stop, but the Talmud Daf Yomi is really the repetitive stop. You keep going back to the beginning, and she just has this overarching theme throughout the chapters of building resilience. And I just wondered whether that was really at the heart of what her move was about.
Yeah, I like that, Paul, and I want to say that her contention in terms of Jewish literature in Hebrew and in Yiddish is, as you say, that it doesn't end, it doesn't resolve. There's no epiphany, there's no grace, there's no being saved. You just have life as is, and it's ongoing, and you go with it. And I think that in a very real way, the fact that the Talmud starts on page 2, never on page 1, right? I mean, the Torah literally has a beginning, Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created. There's no Bereshit bara in the Talmud. There's no page 1. There's no in the beginning. There's only page 2, and it never ends. And I think that perhaps reinforces the idea that this stuff is ongoing. It's been with us forever. It will be with us forever. And our move is not to surrender to it in despair, but it's to go with it and to be strong and to continue. So I do think that studying itself is an act of strength and resilience. And again, to Judy's point earlier, doing something about what you study is also, I think David Kopelman's point is also very fair and valid. I mean, if you think about the modern state of Israel, not to get on a digression here, but what do you think about people who don't serve in the military and don't really contribute to the economy, but they lock themselves in a yeshiva 14 hours a day? And I mean, we've all seen shtisel, right? Who study all day long, right? That's problematic from most of our values point of view, versus somebody who's inspired by their study to act in the world. That's true resilience. Anyone else on this first selection? And then I want to end with a famous story in the Talmud itself of what happens to arguably the greatest rabbi in the Talmud itself. Anyone, any other comments? Okay, so are we frozen? Caitlin, are we frozen or we're good?
We're good.
I believe
good.
Okay. Oh, Connie. Okay, because on my screen stuff looks frozen, but if we're not frozen, that's great. Connie, we're happy to hear one last comment, and then we'll move to
I wanted to say that I think these meetings are an alternate world for me, because we look at the history, we look at the spiritual side of how to live, and we look at the present of what's so horrifying, and we look at how we can use agency to improve things. So I think these meetings are hopeful for me.
Well, thank you, Connie. I certainly feel that very much every Tuesday. So I wanna end this year on, as you know, I'm allergic to bow ties and gift wrapped endings and everything neat and tidy and happy, because that's not life. I'm with the Dara Horn start on page 2 scenario. So I want to leave things unresolved and I want to leave you uncomfortable and bothered. That's my goal. Uncomfortable and bothered as we leave 2021 by ending not on a happy note, but on a note that has it's in the Talmud, and it's, so how can I frame this? A few things to say about it. Rabbi Akiva is probably the hero of the Talmud. Of all the rabbis, Rabbi Akiva is the hero. You know, he doesn't even start studying Talmud till he's 40. And then he learns to read the Aleph Bet, and then he becomes the greatest sage in the Talmud. And you're going to see his end, which is that his flesh is combed by hot irons by the Romans and he dies. Okay? Now, here's some more about it. Our tradition actually takes Rabbi Akiva's story and the story of other Jews who are, I'll use the language of rabbinic Judaism. They're murdered al Kiddush Hashem. They're martyrs for God. And there's a whole liturgy which we read on Yom Kippur, on the holiest day of the year, and it's called Eile Ezkara, these I remember. And it lists 10 stories of, I'll now use Dara Horn's language, 10 stories of 10 dead Jews. And it's part of the Yom Kippur liturgy, and liturgy, it's in the Machzor, has seen fit to put it in the afternoon of our holiest day. However, we never say it at Temple Emmanuel. And we never say it at Temple Emmanuel for reasons that are also a live currents in these conversations, which is it's really a drag. It's really depressing. And on the holiest day of the year, my view is we're looking for uplift, and to read these stories of Jews getting killed by the government is just a bummer and a drag. So we don't read it. But if you go to the Orthodox shul down the street, they do. So what I want to do is read probably the most famous of all the stories that we don't read on Yom Kippur, but other shuls do, is Rabbi Akiva's story. And I want to ask you, what do you think is a healthy practice? Like, as you go forward from 21 to 22, what are you going to do with this story? What's a healthy practice with this story? That's the question. So we're on page 4 of the handout, Caitlin, if you can go to page 4. Okay. The Gemara cites a Baraita which records how Rabbi Akiva himself sacrificed his life for the love of God. The rabbis taught in a Baraita once the wicked regime, the Roman government, decreed that the Jewish people should not engage in the study of the Torah. Papas Ben Yehuda came and found Rabbi Akiva as he was convening public assemblies and engaging in the study of the Torah with them. Papa said to him, Akiva, are you not afraid of the regime? Rabbi Akiva replied to him, I will give you a parable that will explain my actions. To what is this situation comparable? To a fox who was walking alongside a river and saw fish that were gathering from place to place as they were fleeing something. The fox said to the fish, from what are you running away? They told him, from the nets that people are bringing with which to catch us. The fox said to the fish, is it your wish that you come up to dry land where you will be safe from the nets, and we shall dwell together, I and you, just as my ancestors dwelt with your ancestors? The fish said to him, are you the one they describe as the cleverest of the animals? But you are not a clever one, but a fool. If in the climate that sustains our life we are afraid, in the climate that will induce our death, should we not be afraid, all the more so? So too is the situation facing us. If now, as we sit and engage in the study of the Torah, about which it is written, for it is your life and the length of your days, we are nevertheless threatened by such danger. If we would proceed to absent ourselves from the Torah, we would be endangered all the more so. Okay, pause. Can Caitlin, can we go back to full screen for a second? So what you have here is you have a very strong echo of the chapter in Darahorn's book about executed Jews from the Soviet Union. You remember that as she portrays it, the Soviet regime in the mid 20th century said to Jews, oh, we love Jews. You're fine. Just don't be Jewish. Just don't pray. Just don't learn Torah. Just don't observe anything. And so long as don't know Zionism, but so long as you have a Judaism denuded of Judaism, so long as you have zero content, you're fine, right? And we all know, of course, people from Free Soviet Jewry who come to our land who know nothing because they were allowed to know nothing, and they did nothing because they were allowed to do nothing, right? That's the world. And of course, as she describes it, a lot of these poets, these Yiddish and Jewish writers, what could they do? They said, okay. And they kept denuding their Judaism of Judaism. And they were killed anyway. So this is that. This is the Talmudic equivalent of the death of all those Jews in the Soviet Union. You have Papas Ben Yehuda, who's obviously, a Roman type sympathizer of the Jews, saying to Akiva, Papas Ben Yehuda is kind of torn and ambiguous. He's Papas, but he's the son of Yehuda. He's trying to figure out how to make all this work. And he says to Rabbi Akiva, stop doing Jewish stuff in public. You're going to get yourself killed. And Rabbi Akiva, unlike the Soviet poet, says, no, I'm not going to stop. This is my life. If they're going to kill me, they're going to kill me. And if I stop teaching, they're going to kill me anyway. So I'm going to do what I do. Okay. So now that's okay. So now, first of all, before we continue with the story, anyone have any comments so far on this setup? Any comments? This is the original people of dead Jews story in the Talmud. Caitlin, if we can go back to screen share page 4. So Rabbi Akiva, despite the warning, is going to continue to teach. The sages reported it was not even a few days until they arrested Rabbi Akiva and held him in prison. And they also arrested Papas Ben Yehuda and confined him next to Rabbi Akiva. So both the Roman, ally and Rabbi Akiva are in jail. Papas, who brought you here? Papas replied to him, fortunate are you, Rabbi Akiva, for you were apprehended on account of words of Torah. Woe is to Papas, who was apprehended on account of meaningless things. Okay, can we go back, Caitlin, to the full screen? So here you have, again, an echo of executed Jews, because what happens to the executed Jews, they get executed, even though they denuded their Judaism of Judaism, happens to Papas. Right? Papas says, okay, I'm not going to study Torah. I'm not going to learn. I'm not going to do Brit Milah in public. I'm going to play the Roman game. And just like the Soviet Jews who played the Soviet game and were dead, the same thing happens to Papas. And Papas says to Rabbi Akiva, at least you kept your integrity. You kept your integrity. Okay. Caitlin, we'll go back to the page 4 one more time. Okay. So Papas pays his compliment to Rabbi Akiva. At least you had your integrity, which I did not have. When they took Rabbi Akiva out to face his execution, it was the time of the recital of the Shema. Guess what? Right? We began with, what time do you say Shema? And now it's time of the Shema. And they were combing his flesh with iron combs. Yet Rabbi Akiva was accepting upon himself the yoke of the heavenly kingdom. His students said to him, our teacher, even to this extent. And Rabbi Akiva said to them, all my days I was troubled by this verse, b'chol nafshecha, with all your soul. meaning even if he takes your soul. I said to myself, when will the opportunity come to my hands that I may fulfill this verse? And now that it has come to my hands, should I not fulfill it? Rabbi Akiva was drawing out the word echad, so he sang the Shema as they are murdering him until his soul departed with echad. Then the echo of a voice emanated from the heaven and proclaimed, fortunate are you, Rabbi Akiva, that your soul departed as you said, echad, one. He's one with God as he is becoming one with God. The ministering angel said before the Holy Blessed One is he, Zot Torah v'zos chara, this is Torah and this is its reward. Oh, to be among those who die by your hand, Hashem, who die. God replied to them, their portion is eternal life. Another echo of a voice emanated from heaven and proclaimed, fortunate are you, Rabbi Akiva, for you are ready for the life of the world to come. That's the end of the story. Caitlin, if you can go back to full screen, please. So that's the story of the martyrdom of Rabbi Akiva. The original People Love Dead Jews story in the Talmud itself. Let me invite reactions to this story. And there's so much to unpack here, including, would you want to encounter this story on Yom Kippur? Any voices on this story? Anyone? And feel free to, Judy, and then I love Judy's voice, love all new voices as well. But Judy, please get us started. And then I'll take Annette Miller after Judy. Judy, you're on mute, please.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute.
Now you're good. Now you're good.
Oh, okay. Yes, I think I'm not afraid for us to hear these stories, as sad as they are, and maybe on the gruesome side. And I don't think we should be afraid of this. These are not only part of the heritage. I think the message of Akiva it's mind-boggling, and it's inspirational. And yeah, it does take your breath away. But it also says we're a very, very special and strong people. And I think that enhances our identity in terms of being Jewish, all right? That we had people who were so passionate about their love for God and about God that look what they did. I find that mind-boggling. It's not totally depressing. It's a little of both. And I think I find that very exciting from a historical point of view and also from an emotional point of view. So I think we should tell those kind of stories.
Thank you, Judy. Annette Miller, we love your voice.
I agree with Judy. I think we should tell those stories. I'm not exactly sure why we haven't. I think that's one of the reasons why people object to the book. People love dead Jews. I mean, there is an initial sort of like, oh God, I'm not going to go there. I don't really want to confront the history of dead Jews and what it means to be Jewish. Encounters, I could be dead. They'll like me better if I'm dead, and my history is all about that. I think that's been a mistake now that I think about it, is sort of not looking at that. I'm also amazed that the whole story of the Torah, and starting on page 2, is all waiting for Godot. I mean, the Talmud I keep on thinking it was way ahead of Beckett. We knew that it just goes on and there are no answers, and we just keep discussing and waiting. But meanwhile, we live our lives and we have to confront what's awful in our lives. This story about Akiva, of course, is very bothersome. And as a parent, we all might, and grandparent, what about Choose Life? What about the Marranos that hid in Spain? Going back to the Merchant of Venice, the interpretation I did was I played Nerissa, who Tina envisioned as a Marrano, as a woman who went underground and served in that world just so that she would survive, but she kept in secret her her Torah. And we planned a scene where in secret, not written into the play, I prayed and put a babushka on and was in the woods lighting candles. And then suddenly the line is, Narissa, come help me. But before I come on stage, I'm praying. So that was not in the play. It was in Tina's interpretation of Marranos, of Jews who went underground. So what about that? What about the Soviet Jews that did go underground and came out and are living with us now, many not religious at all, and many shunning religion, many saying, forget about it, you know? It got me in trouble. Yeah, I'm Jewish and thank God I'm here and that got me out, but I'm not going to be any more religious. I don't know, Rabbi. I have a, I don't think we all have to be Rabbi Akiva's. I don't know. It's a big question with choosing life and how we go about navigating a world that is against us, how you keep practicing when you come out. Israel made us come out more, allowed us to. We walk very proudly. And anyway.
Yeah. Let me ask you guys to think about a question. I would like to ask you to think about your grandchild, who most is not with the program on Judaism. You know, figure out your own adjective, but your most secular grandchild. Your grandchild who most resists the connection. Either they're just not feeling it, or they're more universalistic, or they just don't like ritual, or they say they don't believe in God, or they just are bored to tears in shul. That grandchild. And you would love nothing more than to have that grandchild feel connected to Judaism. Here's my question for you. Does this story about Rabbi Akiva bring them closer or drive them farther away? I'd love some new voices here. I mean, your grandchild who is just like, why do this? Does this story of Rabbi Akiva, I mean, for the hardcore, what an inspiring story. For the hardcore, oh my God, the agency. In the face of hot combs, I'm saying Shema. Aren't I taking my own agency? Aren't I defining my agenda? Aren't I in the driver's seat of my life? I'm the CEO of my life. Not even the Roman government's execution can stop me from interpreting my own life. Uber agency, yes, if you're hardcore. But if you're not hardcore, is this an Uber turn on or an Uber turn off? I think I'm gonna pass. I think I'm gonna try to get a job at Bain. I think I'm gonna try to end up at a 4th of July barbecue with lobster. Leave me alone. Let me get a Ralph Lauren shirt. Let me look like a polo ad. Let me just pass as a nice Gentile with a can of beer and some lobster, and leave me alone with combing my flesh and saying Shema. That's just yuck. That's my question to you. Okay, Judy, once again, we'll take your voice.
Okay.
And David Koppelman and then Annette.
So this is really very hard, but I have, for instance, both kinds of grandchildren. I have the Jewish day school kids, and I have the very secular. To the very secular kids, no, I can't tell the Rabbi Akiva story. I've got to go to the prophets and talk social justice and pull their Jewish identity and strength there. You are right. The Rabbi Akiva story, I think they would go and run away.
Okay, David Koppelman.
Yeah, I think Annette has a good point that she makes with the Marranos. I mean, if Rabbi Akiva is told that practicing your Judaism in public is going to result in your death, and yet he persists in doing it and he gets some inner solace. My problem is that the Jews population in America is less than 2%. God knows what it is in the world. It's going to be less than it's a minuscule. And I think we have an obligation to our ancestors to try and survive. So my take on it would be, it doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't have to be going to the country club with a Christmas tree and assimilating 100% and abandoning your faith. But it doesn't have to be practicing your faith to the point where you're going to most likely die. I think we have an obligation to survive. And if it means taking the path of the Moranos and practicing your faith secretly, you're really fulfilling your obligation to your ancestors by not dying, by surviving and carrying on your faith, carrying on your tradition, and living for another day.
Thank you, David. Annette.
Rabbi, I think that you're ignoring the "and" that you speak about. You know, to say, don't tell them that story, they'll run away. You know, there's that story and there's and that's what our Torah is all, and the prophets tell us the and we can do both. You can hold both. I'm really interested now to hear for the first time that the conservative movement decided to take that out of the Yom Kippur liturgy.
No, Annette, just so you're clear, that's not the conservative movement, that's Temple Emmanuel.
Okay,
And I own driving that. I just hate these prayers. I find them just a downer. And I was able to get my college degree. And so it's not the movement,
Rabbi,
it's your humble temple.
Get over it. Tell it. I would say tell it because we've all read this. I would say it's okay to tell it. We don't have to be afraid of turning people off. I think that fear of turning people off is really hiding something underneath. We can tell the whole story. We can be an and. We can tell about the wonderful things that Israel is doing and the stuff that has to be worked on, because as we're living, breathing people, we have an and so we don't throw out one or the other and don't look at that. Yeah, there was Ariel Shavit's book, and that was pretty awful. I didn't learn the and. You know, my kids have to know the and. My kids have to know that some Arabs were thrown out. Okay, that's a given. And what happened? So I think there's a real learning that has taken place. I mean, I'm getting this book for everyone. We're all going away on vacation for Christmas. And I think we're going to read this book because I want to hear what my grandkids have to say about it. And I don't want to also, I think some of them, the ones who run away from it, like one of my grandsons who will say, yeah, I'm going to put on my Jewish star now and I'm going to go fight, because that could be a reaction that one kid could have. You know, you could, by telling this awful story, not all whitewashing everything. So anyway, let's keep and going.
Okay, Annette, first of all, when we're back eating Kiddush in the building, I am personally preparing for you a free bagel and tuna fish to thank you for getting People Love Dead Jews for your children and grandchildren for your family getaway. I am personally preparing a bagel and tuna fish in honor of that move. Let me just end by telling you how the rabbis of our tradition strike the balance, because the rabbis are the original embodiers of and. Here's what they do. And we can look at it next time. So we do have Tisha B'Av, which is a fast day. And what the rabbis do on Tisha B'Av, and it is, they say, basically every bad thing that happened on Tisha B'Av. The destruction of the first temple, it happened on Tisha B'Av. The destruction of the second temple, it happened on Tisha B'Av. The sin of the spies, it happened on Tisha B'Av. God deciding that we're not going to let the generation of the Exodus go into the promised land, that happened on Tisha B'Av. The sin of the golden calf happened on Tisha B'Av, right? And why does it do that? Because it allows the Jewish people to acknowledge all of the brokenness and to confine it to a day. So there's going to be a day. It's the 9th of Av. We're going to mourn all the horrible stuff that happened to us. It didn't actually literally happen on the 9th of Av, but what we're doing is we're putting it all on that day so that we can mourn it all. And then when we're done, we can live. It's an and. It's an and. And the big question of the Jewish people was, okay, what about the Holocaust? And the judgment of the Jewish people was the Holocaust is too much to put in with everything else. It deserves its own day. So now, according to the Jewish tradition that we all mark, there are 2 days which are about people love dead Jews. There's Tisha B'Av, which is kind of like the biblical and rabbinic accounting, destruction of the first temple, destruction of the second temple. Every bad thing that happened in ancient times, 9th of Av. And then there's Yom HaShoah. And the message is, for those 2 days, think deeply about people love dead Jews and mourn it. And the other 363 days a year, choose life and live. So that's the original end of the rabbi tradition. For my money, I felt like on Yom Kippur, which is when it's usually recited, is right before Ne'ilah, right before Mincha Ne'ilah. And I just feel like it's the wrong vibe for that space, but reasonable minds can disagree. It's in the Machzor, it's a long service. So if you want to read about the 10 martyrs, knock yourself out next Yom Kippur, it's there. Guys, can I just say thank you for this class? I just love this class. And we will see you back again on January the 4th, Tuesday, January the 4th. And I'm so grateful for this conversation every Tuesday. Lots of love, guys. Happy New Year. Bye.
Thanks, Wes.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
And thank you, Caitlin. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Happy
you.
holiday, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, you'll be hearing from me with the next lessons in January. Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you.